We have a pretty clear idea what we need to do to change. We have an agenda that we're working on. We have that agenda is being pursued and led by all sectors of our economy. And while money matters, what we found is it's more about aligning our resources. You know, they talk about how you only use 13% of your brain or some such thing as that. It's really the same thing in economic development. We are at such a low percentage of our collective capacity. Really, this effort that we've been about is using more of the capacity that exists as opposed to try to adding a bunch of new resources. And so this is about aligning resources. And so that's where philanthropy has come in, because while the questions of economic competitiveness of the what are rather challenging, if you look around the U.S., you know, pretty much everybody's following similar strategies. We need to do innovation, and we need to work on talent, and we have to deal with issues of inclusion and so forth. The real trick is these questions of the how in light of those silos that I mentioned before. And part of it is how can we as institutions and as leaders, as mayors of a community or as commissioners of a county or as leader of a foundation whose mission is to improve the city, be thinking of a broader mandate and challenge. Can our collective leopard change its spots? And the mere fact that the fund exists is really something of a miracle. Because, as I mentioned, philanthropy typically works in a place. We typically work on issues of culture, education, environment, and the like. But we collectively said a few years ago, we're one of the enduring institutions in our community. And as an enduring institution, if we don't step up, who will? And we don't have a shareholder, we don't have a voter we have to answer to. It's incumbent upon us to take some risks and to play a little bit of leadership role. And so why is philanthropy reasonably well positioned? As well, we do have self-interest, but we have somewhat limited self-interest. We're able to take our capital and put it at risk because it is the capital of our benefactors. We're here for the long haul, and for better or worse, people generally look to us as being a neutral party who can do some convening. And so we formed the fund. And as I mentioned, it's some 100 foundations and other organizations from across 16 counties of Northeast Ohio. It includes community foundations, corporate giving programs, hospital conversion foundations, high net worth individuals, university endowments, hospital foundations, and the like. And collectively, we're trying to work with our colleagues in the public sector, the private sector, and the civic sector to work on 3 goals. And it's a program called Advance Northeast Ohio. Over the long haul, we ultimately want to lead the nation, but over the next decade, we're going to try to get job growth up above the national average, income growth up above the national average, and we're going to try to work to ensure that no city has a concentrated poverty rate in excess of 20%. Those are the goals. And the plan focuses in 4 areas: business growth, human capital, racial and economic inclusion, and then ensuring that we have a growth environment with good government collaboration and efficiency. So how are we done? I promise not to take you through the litany of all these sort of things, but we think it's working. And I'd point to the area of entrepreneurship. If you go back, I bet only 5 years ago, if somebody wanted to start a business in Northeast Ohio, the best piece of advice that you could give somebody: get out of town. Honest to God, it was bad. In fact, Entrepreneur Magazine used to rank entrepreneurial cities, and they ranked the top 61. We came in, what number? 61. You say, why the hell couldn't they stop at 60? They just did that to spite us. But every year, we've now been making progress. And we're at this point now, where we believe that we're arguably one of the leading venture capital markets between the 2 coasts. It used to be on a good year, we'd get 25 million of venture going into our companies. Now we're disappointed if we don't have 250 million of money going in. And so this really has been a massive change, and it's starting to be recognized elsewhere. So before you think that I'm up here thumping my chest and saying, boy, philanthropy did that. No, that's not true at all. We had a part to play, but what we learned in the course of this entrepreneurial turnaround is it really does take a village to make a change like this, because this effort to change the entrepreneurial ecosystem in Northeast Ohio was not the work just of a handful or even dozens of organizations. It was literally hundreds of institutions that were involved in this efforts. Our universities and hospitals got behind this. We had angel investor groups come on. We had venture capital. We very consciously went out to form venture firms and the like. Our government stepped up courageously in terms of making capital available and the like. But what had happened was we had had a collective dialogue, and we had not formally, but at least informally agreed that this needs to be a civic priority, and we had come together around that, and big changes were possible. And so as a result, we have a growing portfolio. This is just an example of some of the companies that literally didn't exist just a few years ago of entrepreneurial activity, and we're already starting to see the compounding effect. So that we're now at the point where we've gotten a couple $2 billion of capital into our system. So we think we found a formula that works. It's somewhere between top down and bottom up. Okay, so what does all that mean to you and in this conversation here today? Well, one of the things we recognize in our plan is that it's not just about creating new industries and new companies and so forth, that the kinds of changes that we're making don't stand a chance of sticking unless we remove the impediments to growth, unless we really have a growth environment. And moreover, that we have the ability to sustain these kinds of changes over the long haul. And sitting right in the middle of that are issues of spatial relationships. And the spatial relationships that we have are kind of front and center, I think, in the work of most of the regional councils. And really, the elephant in the room for us in Northeast Ohio is no-growth sprawl. We don't like to talk about it. In fact, we almost never do talk about it, but it's huge. But the analogy I would use, if my animation works, is imagine you own a factory. You make widgets, right? And you make your widgets, and every year demand for your widgets is flat. So after year one, you go back to your board of directors and you say, you know, I know widget demand was flat, but I'd like to expand capacity. The board of directors says, okay, we'll do that. And so you do that, and sure enough, next year, widget sales are flat, and you go back to the board of directors again, and you say, you know, I want to expand capacity again. Widget sales flat, you go back third year, we're going to do that again, and you do that every year. For 50 years, you expand capacity while sales are flat. What do you think happens to the company? Right? Capital investment goes up, sales stay flat. It doesn't work, it goes bankrupt. But that is collectively what's happening in a great number of our communities. Here's our data. We may have data for your community as well. So the top line is the rate at which we are converting land. The bottom line is the rate at which our population is growing. And you see that for the last, I guess in this instance, this was over a 30-year time frame, we've been growing the capacity of our plant at 10 times the rate of demand. 10 times the rate of demand over decades of time. And the consequence of that is that local government is now 20% of our GDP. It is the largest industry we have. And what's crazy about that is that this is happening at a time when all of our individual units of government are squeezing down and squeezing down and squeezing down, but we have this systems problem that causes the total cost to go up. And so it becomes really, quite frankly, an unsustainable system.